Hi, this is Ken McCarthy of plantwisdom.org, and today we're going to be talking with somebody I've been looking forward to talking to for actually a very long time. I first saw advertisements for her courses, I'm guessing it was 10 years ago, maybe even longer. I'll have to ask how long she's been teaching. We're going to talk about her practice as an herbalist and also as a forager. It's a funny word, but we'll use that word, forager. But basically somebody that's in tune with nature and is involved with nature and working with nature on a daily basis. Welcome, Dina Falconi.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. And yeah, I remember seeing flyers for your courses. Could it have been 10 years ago?
It could have been 25 years ago.
Oh, okay, great. Great.
Yeah.
Well, I remember the flyers that I saw had to do with natural body care products, how to formulate them yourself.
Sure.
And I thought that was very intriguing, and of course it was very avant-garde. I mean, now this kind of thing is fairly well known and it's around, but back then that was pretty avant-garde stuff. Tell us where are you originally from, and how did you find yourself working in the field of plants and using plants for health?
Let's see. I was raised in New York City. I was raised downtown in the avant-garde section of New York City called the East Village. Through 60s and 70s and 80s, a pretty radical time there. And college brought me out of the city. And then, but my plant I should say that the beginnings of what I'm doing were already established there, even though it was an urban setting. It was a very radical neighborhood with lots of different herb stores and food influences and people seeking healing through food and food as medicine, which is pretty much, I would say, more that would be the trajectory that I've followed, is the food as medicine theme or healing with food, which brought me into different healing modalities and thinking about what I put on my skin, working on making natural body care, teaching people how to do that. So it came from that little girl in the East Village kind of striving for something, looking for health and healing in an extremely chaotic setting.
And for people that, I don't mean to interrupt, but for people that don't know, the East Village in the 60s and 70s and even in the 80s was pretty close to the Wild West.
Exactly.
It was heavy. It was like
exactly.
Beirut. Yeah, it wasn't just a city neighborhood.
Exactly. I mean, even though it had the strength of food cultures that really merged there, and it had the melting pot unique to that time and place, which I don't really see too much, and that's kind of who I am to some degree. So this breaking or merging of boundaries and asking questions and looking at life from a very odd perspective, I think, kind of influenced my life as a forager, asking deeper questions, kind of, not being, it's kind of a revolutionary place, really. It was breaking all the rules at that time and that place in history. And so I think for me there was the need to create some sanity, which was, okay, well, I'm going to take my health in my hands. This is empowering.
Mm-hmm.
I can do this. Just even as an 11-year-old girl, I began this journey and this theme of, okay, I'm not going to go eat the junk food from the bodegas. I'm going to, go to the health food store, which was also right across the street. So I had access. That was another thing. I had access to herb stores and alternative thinking around food. But I didn't know at that age what was happening. It just was unfolding. I did have a mentor, unofficial, not an official mentor, but a family friend who had cured himself. His name was Mickey Carter, of terminal illness, and he, lived for another 35 years, and he was my mentor without knowing it. He was helping me understand. So Whole Foods, he was into the health food movement, and using herbs and not, bypassing as much pharmaceutical use. I don't know if he ever really used any more medications, maybe late in his life. He was a very inspiring guy for me, an older man. Let's see, what else? So,
well, maybe let me ask you,
yeah,
since we have the benefit of your experience, do you recall any of the interesting ventures, stores, and things that were going on in the East Village in that era? I think of Angelica's, but that's sort of more like 80s, or was that up and running
no,
in the 70s?
Angelica's was it came in exactly as my 11-year-old time. I think it was 76, 75, 76. It was maybe it was 77, Angelica's Urban Spice, and there was the Bethlehem Bakery that was owned by Kim. There was Angelica's Urban Spice, and there was Angelica's Restaurant, and that was way before it was hip. It was like I was the only person going to those. I was like the only person eating from Angelica's, it seemed like at that time. Walking home from school, like 12-year-old girl, and they were happy to greet me. So Angelica's was there. There was Pete's Spice, which was really an intense spice store on 10th and 1st, 10th and 11th and 1st. There was, the names are out of my mind. Yeah.
There was a sort of a macrobiotic style restaurant on St. Mark's.
Oh, okay, Dojo. I think
Dojo, right.
But there was the Cauldron. Dojo wasn't truly macro. There was the Cauldron on 6th Street between 1st and 2nd, which is like now Little India. Like they have all the little Indian restaurants there. That Cauldron was, I think it was like a kosher, Hasidic Jewish macrobiotic restaurant that I used to go
remember
to.
it. I remember. I graduated. I appreciate our listeners indulging us in this, but I graduated from high school in New York City in '77. So I know exactly. I remember the Cauldron very well, and it in fact was a kosher macrobiotic restaurant.
Yeah.
So college got you out of the city. Where did you go to?
I went to Colgate. I went to Colgate University. I was in art. I went to Performing Arts High School in New York City. Down in the by Times Square, before Times Square was any place you wanted to be either. I don't know if you know that school. Anyway, it was a performing focused acting, dancing, and music, not music and art, which was uptown. This was a small, sort of more, I think of it as an elite kind of school. It had more attitude. It was a lot more, and so I went there, and I was really kind of all my life trained to be a creative person, ask questions, deal with, I want to create, what do I want to create? And I got so fed up after high school with all these artists that I was like, I want to go to a conservative college. I want to get the heck out of this kind of ego world, of the Village, too, which is all about artists and expressing yourself. And I went to PS3, which was like an experimental open school, open door, I think it was called, where there were no boundaries. Again, you could just go in and out as you wished. You didn't have to raise your hand. It's all about you express yourself, and I think I was needing more structure and also wanting to get away from what I felt at that time was very narcissistic or egoistic kind of existence. And so I went to Colgate, which was like crazy, the opposite extreme, a very conservative, more right, kind of culturally right-wing school in the middle of New York State, like in cow country.
Literally in the middle of New York State. You're really out in the countryside when you're at Colgate University.
You know it.
Yeah, well, I mean, to give people a clue, that the closest nearest cities are Utica and Syracuse, and they're not that close.
Exactly. It's beautiful there. I mean, it was so beautiful, especially in the fall, all the the colors and the rolling hills. But so I went to Colgate, and then at Colgate I went to India through Colgate University. There was a study group so I could study yoga and Bharatanatyam dance and the culture of South India, and it was intense, and that was a bit of a turning point, I think, where I realized, I was learning the Ayurvedic, no, not Ayurvedic, wrong, the Vedas, really going back to the philosophy or the thinking around the yoga sutra, the yoga practice, and then doing practical yoga, kind of part of that quest of learning and looking like where in the world, who do they, who's teaching this, where is the culture that I can learn from, continuing that investigation. And it kind of shook me up, though. It made me realize it's all, anyway, that's a long conversation. I won't go.
Sure. But those are three big leaps from the Lower East Side, or from the East Village of the 70s to Colgate University to India.
Exactly.
I'm amazed you held it together.
I don't think I did. But, and then I went back to Colgate. And I think there was a revelation in India that life was, at least in that young age, I was, late teens. I was a late teen. And it was, so you come from this place in the East Village, in this performing arts high school that's all about fame, and then, searching for the meaning of life, and then you get cracked open in India and you're like, oh my God, what is the meaning of life? And I think that really set the stage a bit more for what followed, which was wanting to be of some kind of service, without...
Mm-hmm.
So it was like bringing that back into the picture. And maybe that happens also as you age. And that's where I think my wish to help people connect to nature, and, myself included, and my healing process, but then to take it beyond myself and be useful in the world or be helpful in some way, not just about my own existence. And I think that's where the herbal... I then didn't graduate from Colgate. I transferred to Bard College and did go back to the creative arts part and did more artistic focus there with a BFA graduating, and so Colgate to Bard, and then the herbal studies really came in earnest after graduating, because again it was how can I mean, and it was not a journey that was decided. It seems to always be unfolding for me. It's very organic, even though I have very strong instincts and a very distinct path. It really kind of unfolds through finding through time. It's not like a lot of my friends decide very intellectually the steps they're going to take in life, and for me, I think through things, but it isn't. It's much more of an organic evolution. So, yep. And go ahead.
Makes sense. I mean, it would be hard to plan the various sequences of things that you experienced, between
exactly.
East Village, India, Colgate University, and then Bard, which in those days, I mean, it's an interesting place today, but it was a pretty wild place back then. I remember too. It's changed a lot. It's tightened up quite a bit since then.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it was a place where, again, it was a place where thinkers came really to explore and, again, break rules and stuff like that, and not be so establishment, even though now it is much more. I went to Colgate because I thought I would do pre-med because I wanted to do some kind of alternative healing, but the pre-med program was so regurgitative. There was no thinking. There was no creative thinking that I really couldn't stay in that mode where you just memorize and spit back data. So it was lacking in integrative, education. It didn't integrate for me.
That's sort of a big difference, isn't it, between traditional medical practice and healing with food. I have a nephew who's in that process now. He's in medical school his first year, and he's enjoying it, and he's good at it. But it really is just hitting the books and memorizing what's in there and regurgitating it. I don't see a lot of independent thinking being encouraged at all.
Absolutely, you're right. That was what I found. Nobody wanted to talk about anything. I was like, what do you think about this? And how could that be? And there was no process. There was no bringing yourself to the table. It was just memorize this, spit it back, and you will, and then forget it, actually. It wasn't about integrating the data or, and for me, that's just not who I am. Even though I love to learn, I don't want to just memorize. I want it to be a creative process. So, yeah.
That may explain why we have the kind of medical system we have. You know, where you go into a doctor's office and very often not a whole lot goes on, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
A lot of people, well, I don't want to put down, I'm grateful for what the medical profession offers us, but it's not a helpful way of life. It's a helpful intervention, and it's great for those reasons, but it's not helping us create a healthy culture or healthy people right now. You know, it doesn't.
When did you discover that you were interested in plants and their healing potential?
Well, because of that theme of holistic healing through food as a preteen, I really pushed away a lot of the medical establishment because, you know, I didn't want to deal with chemicals. So whenever I got sick, I would look to the herbs, even at a young age, and to food, and not use aspirin anymore. Even, for example, like say no to these things that are very commonly used. Trying to tap into the wisdom of my body and of nature to heal, and so that's a big departure too culturally, not just popping pills or taking things. So the herbs came in young. The food is the herbs too. That's the other part. It's not so separate. Your food is your medicine, and a lot of the foraging plants that we eat are also the herbs that we use for medicine. So there is a big blur that starts to occur. I got into the live plants, though, in earnest after college, right after college. And then I started studying, actually. I did an apprenticeship with an herbalist in the Hudson Valley. It was a very hands-on make medicine for her company program, and that was 2 years of apprenticeship, and then I made the medicines for her company for 2 years. They're very basic folk-like herb medicines. They're not as nuanced as my training taught me later, but that was a good 4 or 5 years of a deep immersion. That was like hands-on with the plants, and then I did do a clinical training with a man in New York City, back to the city. Yeah, and that's where I studied, because people coming to you and saying, what do I do for this, what do I do for that? And it felt like I needed to know more before I could say something. So then I felt I needed to train with the diagnostic techniques and protocols, and he was the premier clinician of that period in the early 90s. I studied with him for 3 years, a little less than 3 years, just he and I, a tutorial that I set up for myself. And so that gave me the tools to then say I can work clinically now, see clients, and they can consult with me, and I can help to create a specific protocol for them, so that you're not just generically saying, oh, use this herb for that disease. You don't treat disease here at all. You really look at the whole client, the whole picture, the whole human organism, and then
right. That's a very important point. Maybe we could focus on that a little bit. When people are first learning about herbs, it's very easy to get into a sort of a mechanistic approach. You have an ailment, you look up and you see what's good for that ailment, and you say, okay, I'll try it. And I guess that's how we start. But you've just made a really important point, that it's ultimately not the disease that's being treated. It's the person. So what kind of, for instance, that implies there's some kind of diagnostic methodology, observation, asking questions. I know some herbalists do pulse reading. There's probably a lot involved in getting to know the person to see which plant would be appropriate for them, as opposed to, oh, this is good for colds or this is good for earache.
Exactly, because each person's got a different story, and that's led them to that particular circumstance. Whatever the symptoms are expressing themselves, you could say it's a cold, but it's within that context, that human context. And so we need to hear that story before we can, I feel, be as effective as we can. Certainly, you can say something as generic, as like, I love hyssop. It's an herb we can grow. It's a beautiful medicinal, and it is good for most colds, most types of colds, but it's specific for a certain kind of cold. And so it's matching the client with. It's not only the herbs, though; it's food too. So for me, I'll take in a case, and it does have the diagnosis comes through language. So there's lots of questions. So this was in William. When William was training me, there was a lot of diagnostic tools, and you have many to work with. And I prefer the questioning one, where there's like very specific questions which help you fill a picture out of what's happening. And then you also use visual clues. You're looking for signs and, help you to see, okay, is this person inflamed? Is there heat? Are they dry? Are they cold? It's very primitive, it's very elemental. So you're just looking for really these elemental clues that help you then relate to, okay, what do they need? And then you move into the food, lifestyle, and herb protocols. Not protocols, right, because you're going to develop that protocol, but you think through. So you have many, many tools to diagnose and also to help with. And you're trying your best to match, and you can shift things around. And you work, I work with people for years and years. It isn't like just boom, once. Well, sometimes it is, but it's an ongoing journey. It's an ongoing exploration. And so for me, it's not even about, we don't do any of the healing. We don't, as practitioners, we help someone heal. We help them find within their capacity, what they can do to help themselves. That's how it works. It's their body.
Yep.
Their body that has to respond. So we're limited to what my knowledge is also limited, but what their body's ability to do with what's given is also part of the limitation. So it's a journey. After I did this intensive training, I realized that I know less. You feel like,
yes.
you're going to come out with, really clear protocols and know what to do, and you realize, no, it's all a mystery, and it's not within our control. But I still feel qualified to help within that conversation, and to be helpful. I know it sounds really vague.
No, I think anybody that takes the time to really learn a subject deeply gets to the point where they realize, wow, there's a lot to this. There's a whole lot more than I had. And you can't know that until you've gone that distance.
Right.
It's so easy to be an expert when you have one book and you don't question it too deeply. It feels harder when you actually have real expertise.
Yeah.
Now, you've done a lot of interesting things, but the thing that I'd like to focus on now, if you don't mind, is you've put a lot of your knowledge, and not just knowledge, but also, for lack of a better word, feeling, into a book that is called Foraging and Feasting, a field guide and wild food cookbook. And it is, for people that haven't seen it yet, it's a really physically beautiful book. It's got a lot of good technical information, obviously, but it's also just a pleasure to look at and a pleasure to page through, which I think is an important part of the bookmaking art. You want to make the information as appealing and inspiring as possible. Now that book is not really old. It's been around a bit, but how did it come to be, and or at least into this form? I have a feeling it's been, in a sense, it's been in development for a long time.
Yes, it has been. I say that the seeds for this book were planted in, 76 in the East Village already. A lot of what I'm trying to share in the Foraging and Feasting book is about celebration. It's about connecting to nature and feeding oneself direct from nature, direct from the wild earth, so to speak. And so for me, it's moving away from the idea of illness and going into the place where nature heals, or nature nurtures, or nature feeds. And so the book is a celebration of 50 wild plants. You can bring them into the landscape too. There are things we also cultivate, but they're also found wild. So it's 50 plants that grow pretty abundantly in our area, and it's about abundance too. It's to shift that thinking over from a scarcity mindset. So look what the earth provides, wild and weedy and everywhere. I really wanted to feature plants that were very common, that most people could find in the temperate zones of the world, certainly in our northeast zone. It wouldn't be hard to find. You don't have to trek far. It's probably something you're stepping on right now. And for me, there's such excitement in that. It's like, what? This is all around us, that message of abundance. And so the book is supposed to be, it's seductive in what you were describing, that it's beautiful,
yes,
and you want to hold it, and you want to, I designed the book with my illustrator. We published it. So I pretty much had the vision, and she really helped with bringing the vision to life with me. I directed this whole journey, but her skills as an illustrator made, the pages come to life. I did create the design of the pages with her help, and also with, we had great support. We had people on because I'm not a computer literate person, so I was working with designers to get the right message, to tell the right story, my story. But so the book is meant to draw people into these really common invasive plants, and then look at them as gifts, and then take them into the kitchen and make them into delicious, nourishing food, while they're also healing herbs. So they're crossing over from just, they are what's in the in the Noma kind of restaurants these days. They're featuring these weedy things, but you can too. Everyone can. It's not an elitist book. It's a book that's trying to bring food to everyone. That's the food sovereignty piece is strong for me. Food justice, wanting people to eat well and be well nourished. So a big theme in the book is about that too. There's the kitchen arts section. So there's the beautiful plant maps where you are drawn in to meet these plants, and then you go find them in your landscape, in your backyard. And then I want you to be drawn into your kitchen and play in there and make food. And I feel like that's also extremely revolutionary in this modern day. So both the connecting direct to nature, the harvesting of the food, and then putting that into your kitchen, and making food yourself. I know it sounds so basic, but people don't do that anymore. And I feel like that's a big missing link to health. In all those three steps, are missing.
I think the connection between food and nourishment has been broken by the way our society operates these days. Food comes from a store, it's in a box, it's put in a microwave, or you get it out of a fast food, restaurant. So we've really lost a lot of basic common sense wisdom that just kept humanity going for millennia.
I couldn't agree with you more. Right, we've lost our traditions.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things about the book, and it just occurred to me, you published it yourself. I don't think you could find a publisher in the world that would have been willing to put the amount of visual effort into, because there's, like I said before, for people that haven't seen it, there's a lot of textual information, but there's a tremendous amount of visual information, very vivid visual information too. So going the self-publishing route, I think made a lot of sense, because I've dealt with publishers, and I have friends that have dealt with them, and they're always watching their budgets and cutting corners, and can we use less color, and can we not have color on every page, and all those things take a lot of money and investment, and publishers these days don't really want to do that so much. So this is a book that really, I have to say, for people that haven't seen it yet, it really jumps out at you. It's not another book on the shelf.
Yeah, I think you're right. The publishers, well, first of all, they wouldn't have paid us enough to put the amount of blood that we put in.
Right, exactly.
But also, you're right, the creative license. So it goes back to my early days of, I'm going to create this. This is my vision. I know what it needs to say. It's my story. And I want to be able to make it as strong as possible. And it's not about me. It's about the creation. It's about making this most useful. How can we really speak this story as clearly as possible? That was my intention. And grab this illustrator who happened to move nearby a couple of miles, grab the editor, whoever. I was just really motivated to tell this story of, of a journey that everyone can take, and so, and it's a utilitarian book as much as it's beautiful. It's really high functioning. You can use it.
It's very much the way you were describing it earlier. It sort of just made me aware of what was right in front of me. It really is a course. It's a book, but it's book could be something you just sort of read and say, oh, that was interesting. Next, but this is really a course that if you want to take it at that level, it could take you from knowing almost nothing to being able to identify plants in the wild, know what they're good for, as you said, bring them into your home, into your kitchen, prepare them, and integrate them into your life. So it's not just something. There's a lot of herb books. Obviously, I'm looking at a wall here that I have, and they're all great in their own way. But so many of them are they're just sort of like, well, this plant's good for this, this, and this. And then that's it. That's where they leave it. And there's so much more to any given plant. Hey, let's take a plant or two, or maybe even three, that's in your book, and tell us about maybe a plant that maybe we've all seen. Some of us might even be vaguely aware that it's got some nutritional properties. And let's take one or two of the plants and go into depth with them. Your choice.
Sure. A couple of things, too, just before we embark on that journey, which sounds great, is that there is in the book, just as you were saying, it's meant to be a reference for the rest of your life. It's meant to inspire and be useful. Even for me who wrote it, I use it all the time. It's where I've put all the data that I can go look for, So just to put that out there, it's meant to stay alive even through generations. That's my wish. And then also there's the kitchen literacy piece, which you don't have to forage. There's the whole kitchen arts section where I really try to get folks to get literate in the kitchen again with master recipes and templates of recipes, and then how you use the wild or the garden produce, or the store-bought. So just to finish that.
I'm glad you said that because it's so important. There are these wonderful farmers markets now, and all kinds of plants are showing up at them. And then there's the CSAs, and they're doing great work. But if you don't know how to cook the stuff, you're lost. And a lot of us don't have parents or grandparents that taught us what to do with these plants.
Right. So there's 100 master recipes that take the foraged or the bought produce and turn it into, my perspective, delectable like food. So there's 100. I think of them as like classics, or it's everywhere from beverage to dessert and everything in between, and condiments, making your own ketchup, depending on what fruits in season, wild or cultivated. So for me, there's that really deep commitment to the kitchen and the food and the eating of foods that are prepared with nourishment in mind, and also with connection to ecological wellness. The recipes really try to feature that too. Okay, so that being said, let's go back to your question, or your. So let's focus on garlic mustard.
Garlic mustard, great.
And that's a really. I just dug some up right now today. I posted it on Foraging and Feasting Facebook page. If folks are interested in the Facebook thing or Instagram, every few days I post something just to inspire people. Go out there, find this, do this with it.
Where can we find that?
There's the Foraging and Feasting Facebook page, and there's Foraging and Feasting Instagram. And they're little daily, I'd say every 2 or 3 days, there are posts that are inspiring to get you out there to connect.
Great.
So today was garlic mustard, actually, the post I did, because that's popping up right now. And so it's fun. I wish people had the book in front of them. You have to eat plants properly. So as a caveat, as an issue, you can't just go out and grab something you don't know. So patience is important here. You must, with 100% accuracy, identify your plant. That's why the book is designed the way it is, too, so that it helps you do that. As much as it's beautiful, the point is that it's super functional. So you're going to track the plant through its whole life cycle, sometimes 2 or 4 years, depending on what it is. And so we want to inspire you to get out there and eat, but we don't want you to eat something you're not 100% sure you you're
Right,
accurate.
right. Very, very, very important. Yeah, there's
really
plenty
important.
of plants out there, and you have plenty of time to get it right, and
Exactly.
and you don't have to grab it all in one day.
No.
And you make a very interesting point too. Is with certain books, they show you what the plant looks like at a certain point in its evolution, but it may look one way in the spring, a different way in the summer, different in the fall, and then next year it might look entirely different.
Exactly.
So you need a reference that shows you all the different phases that a plant goes through. So yeah, garlic mustard is everywhere, and wow, it's already up in February in the Hudson Valley.
Yeah, because we have a crazy February right now, but normally it's up in March. Yeah. But so this garlic mustard is something that if you do know how to identify it, so make sure that you've got that right. Then you can go out there right now and you can eat those leaves. You can put them into your salad. They have a bitter, I think of them as bittersweet, pungent, a slight garlicky, oniony flavor, almost broccoli rabe related in its bitterness. And so those leaves are food. They're salad, they're pesto. I love to make wild green pestos, and that makes a great addition to the pestos. And then the roots can be dug out right now. So those that hate the plant because it's invasive can dig the root. And right now in this stage, the root is full of that horseradish-like flavor. And so that can be, grated up and turned into horseradish condiment the way you do regular horseradish. It is a relative of horseradish anyway. It's the same family. It's a cousin, Brassicaceae family we have here. So the whole plant is useful. And right now, the leaf and the root are what we use. Later in the season, we eat the flowers, and then we can eat the seeds, although they're tedious for me. I don't work too much with the seeds. But so here we have something that's got vitamin A, beta-carotene that is, vitamin C, and a bitter principle, which the bitters do so many things in the body physiologically, but are most known for helping digestion, so that they stimulate digestive function. They help your gallbladder to, secrete bile so you can digest your fats and you have good bowel movements. So right there, here's your invasive that's like a super ally, super helpful.
And that's an interesting thing, this whole notion of invasives. And it's true that garlic mustard is not native to North America, as far as I understand, and that it came over in the last century, the 19th century. And then some people will say, "Oh, this is a terrible plant. We've got to rip it out. We've got to eliminate it because it's not natural." But that's a whole another discussion.
It is.
If it's growing, it's natural.
Right. I think there's some valid points in the issue with invasives, and for example, here on our landscape, I do like to have a biodiversity that's extensive, and so I don't want certain plants to take over, and garlic mustard is one of them, but I do want it, so I need to control it, so to my wishes. I don't want it to take over the golden seal patch, which I've established, which is an endangered species. So I understand that. I don't want it to dominate, but I do want it. So I need to know how to work with it, and that's part of the fun.
And a great way to control it is to eat it.
Exactly. And to dig it up right now, if you're really having issues with it and there's just too much, you dig it up right now. And then another simple thing is, once it starts to seed, well, you don't let it. You would just pull the. It's very easy to control once you understand how it reproduces, which is by seed in its second year of life. And then, you just make sure you leave enough that you can eat from it, because I feel like it's a resource for us. It's a free food. It's abundant. You don't need to cultivate it. You don't need to take care of it. And it's right there for us. So why would we not want it? But I understand we don't want it to take over. So we want to find that balance in our landscape.
We also don't need to drop a plane load of chemicals on it, to make it go away. Yeah, so it's really more a matter of working with these plants. They're not invasive in the sense of being creatures from the dark. They're just plants, and you're a human being, and you can, as you said, like when they flower, make sure that the seeds don't get a chance to form, and that's going to be a control method. And at this time of year, dig some of them up and eat the roots, and that will keep, that'll keep them down. So somebody that wanted to pursue this, it would be great if they had your book, and then they could go through it and they could see the different looks that the plant has during the phases of its life, the ways to use it, and then they could go to the kitchen section, and I assume there's some advice on how to work with roots in the kitchen, because that throws a lot of people, I think. They hear about roots and they're like, what? What am I supposed to do with those things? I can't chew them.
Right. Well, you can chew this. This is really easy. The garlic mustard roots you can mince up and just put into your sandwich or toss it into salad. It's very tender.
Okay.
So it's more like, it's like a radish, It's a very nice, pungent radishy, it's related to radish. Again, that's in the same family.
Great. So we've got the garlic mustard. How about another one?
Okay. Do we want to stay with what's out there right now? Is that kind of the idea?
That's a good question. We're recording this in very late February. It'll be March soon. And by the way, this is for those who want to interview foragers. This is one of the best times because they're not out. They're not out all day gathering things. Well, why don't we give people something to look forward to? How about
spring
will really be springing, in this part of the world around May 1st. To me, that's when it.
Okay.
May Day,
so let's go to nettle then. Let's go to nettle.
Nettle, the great nettle.
The nettle, which people really love, and mostly they buy it because they don't know how to ID it. But it's actually, this is also brought in from Europe, I believe, but there is a native species, and anyway, it can become invasive, and so if you have nettle in your landscape, you want to make sure, again, that you're controlling it to where you want it to be. I know a friend in England, for example, it's so invasive, like she can't garden, so she has to really control it. But for me, nettle is an amazing resource, food-wise, nutrient-wise, medicinally. So I make sure that there's sections on my land here that nettle can go crazy, because I want to be able to go and harvest. What's that? And so
there are. Excuse me, sorry to interrupt, but there's a lot of different kinds of nettle. There's a specific one that you probably have in mind, though, huh?
Well, so the nettle that I'm referring to, its Latin name is called Urtica dioica or dioica. It's important to check scientific name with common name because common names, like you said, could mean anything. So the scientific names, even though it sounds sort of academic or annoying, are important. They're the passport name. They're the traveling name, and they're the one, that's the name you want to confirm. So this is the nettle that people think of as stinging nettle, the common green infusion people are drinking. It's not purple dead nettle. It's not wood nettle. Those are different species, different genuses, totally different.
Sure. And so these Latin names can be intimidating, but when the reason they're helpful is they may call this plant something completely different down south, and then in India they might call it something else, and in Tennessee they might call it something else, and so that any plant might have dozens of popular names. So it's really great to know, okay, great, what's the Latin name for this plant, because that's universal.
Exactly. So this is Urtica dioica, like I said, of the Urticaceae family, and this plant shows up. It depends on the spring, but let's say by May 1st, you're going to have really nice shoots, maybe 4 to 6 inches tall, and that's a perfect time to harvest this plant. And what you have then is this what's called a pot herb, a plant you throw in a pot and cook, and that can mean turning it into spanakopita or using it in lasagna or quiches, or just steaming it and then adding olive oil if you like, and lemon juice or butter, or making creamed nettle, or nettle soup is very popular. Sautéing, steaming. There's, think of how you might use Swiss chard and kale. Okay. Nettle it's got its own personality, but in the way that you might use those, or even spinach, you could use nettle. But it's its own thing as well, but it kind of helps in that food literacy piece, like how do you plug, the wild into recipes. And so I've got it in frittatas and in omelets. And it's so culinarily, you've got this leafy green, and it's deep green. It has almost a meaty-like quality, and so you would use it in these things I just mentioned in these dishes. But nutritionally, it's probably beats kale, in nutrient content. It's hard to get data these days. That's an issue for me, is I'd like to have more recent nutrient content published, because I don't really know. The stuff I'm reading is for kale grown in California, for kale grown here. What year was it tested? Was it in 1950 or recent? So the nettle too, I've got I think a 76 database. I don't know, but anyway, just that's an aside for me. I wish I could work with a lab to test veg just to know what's going on nutritionally. But from that background, from doing the research that's maybe dated, the nettle kicks everything kind of in the butt. It's way high.
And it's very popular. I know Russian people just love nettle. They just can't get enough of it.
Yeah.
Now, but nettle has this plant has an unusual quality in that it stings.
Yes, it stings, and so the sting is neutralized through cooking. But if you handle it, you could get stung, which some people think is therapeutic. I have mixed thoughts about it. I think it can be appropriate sometimes, but it's very irritating. So you would use gloves if you don't want to get stung. Cover your arms. And the other thing about nettle is it's also medicinal. So here's a real food medicine. This is where the worlds meet pretty strongly in nettle. So nettle is also used for things like hyperallergenic responses. So you're moderating the immune response. You're modulating immune response. So to calm allergic responses, people will do what's called a nettle infusion, consume nettle leaf that's been dried and then long steeped in a tightly covered vessel, basically like a canning jar, and then you drink your 3 cups a day. So it's used as a tonic for helping moderate or modulate immune response. It's used for supporting adrenal function. It's used for building blood when you have things like anemia. Again, it's very high in minerals. It's magnesium-rich, iron-rich, calcium-rich, potassium-rich. So, of course, when you look at superfoods, I think of nettle as a superfood. You feed the body, and then it can take care of itself. That's back to that clinical work where you're really looking to how can we deeply feed this human organism so that it can take care of itself. It's the nurture principle. You're nourishing.
And nettle certainly qualifies as a superfood by any standard.
I agree, yeah.
Yeah, so you don't have to get them, you don't have to get your superfoods from the Amazon jungle. I mean, that's nice if you want to do that. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's good to know that, and this goes to something you said earlier, this idea of abundance. Nature has spread superfoods everywhere, and there are plenty of them probably within a 100-yard walk of your house if you live in the country, or even the suburbs. So that you don't have to go to the health food store and buy something very expensive to get a superfood. You can maybe find it right in your yard or in your garden.
A good example, yeah, exactly, Ken. I mean, a good example is the dandelion. The dandelion is a superfood, and it's growing in everyone's lawns. It's growing in the city if you can find a clean spot to harvest from. That dandelion is super powerful. For food, for medicine, it helps. It's considered a tonic, or what was the term? Let's skip my brain. There's a term for plants you use long term, not adaptogens, which are more for adrenal function, but something that you incorporate into your life and that it gently shifts you over into a state of health. That's the dandelion. It's gentle but effective. So eating the dandelion leaves, the dandelion blossoms, the dandelion roots, the dandelion buds, it's a powerhouse of nutrients and has medicinal constituents as well that help the liver function properly. When you support liver function, you take care of 500 things in the body. Alterative. It's alterative. The term that's used for something like the dandelion and the burdock, these two weeds that we have that are everywhere. It's called, they're alternatives. They alter the body into a state of health, but they're gentle. Okay. They're like foods. Yeah.
Right, and dandelion and burdock are two other plants that are in your book. Let's talk about how people can get this book and how they can learn more about it. Where should they go? The title again is Foraging and Feasting: A Field Guide and Wild Food Cookbook. So where do they go?
They can go right to my website, botanicalartspress.com, botanicalartspress.com, and they can buy it right from us.
Great. And next year, I want to encourage everybody. Dina puts out a calendar that's related to the book, and I got my 2017 calendar. Apparently, they're sold out now. But next year, you definitely, I have it right in my kitchen, and it's great because you can spend a whole month getting to really know one plant, which is a great thing. This month, it's roses. Next month, it's the Jerusalem artichoke, and so I'm looking forward to March and studying up on that plant. So the website again is Botanical Arts. That's plural, botanicalartspress.com. We'll have the link below, right beneath the interview, and it's a marvelous book. You must see it, and it's not just a book that you put on the shelf and say, okay, I've got another herb book. It's really a lifetime resource and course book that can take you from being outdoors and identifying plants to knowing how to gather them at the right time in the right way, and then what to do with them once you finally have found them, what to do when you bring them home, how to cook them, how to integrate them into your diet, with those 100 recipes, which are sort of a base for expanding with your own creativity into all kinds of different directions. Basically, you want to break the ice. We've got this big barrier between ourselves and nature around us, and probably the quickest way to start breaking that barrier down is to learn to identify the plants and then bring them home, and do with them what they were designed to be done with.
Very nice. I like what you said. Yeah.
Enjoy and eat them. So, Dina Falconi, thank you so much for giving us an hour of your time today and for producing this beautiful, wonderful resource for everybody. Again, people that want to check it out, and I strongly recommend that you do, go to botanicalartspress.com.